evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Get this up. Okay, and then let's see.
Okay, Peter, do you want to try? Oh, there it is. Perfect.
Let me make sure I can do this. There you go. All done?
Okay,
Okay.
well, looks good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, Sally. Yeah,
Hi.
I was going to give folks just another minute in case they're logging on, but looks like we have a good group already. Welcome, everyone.
I'm seeing some more folks hopping on, so we do have a good group, but there are people still joining us.
Okay, we'll give it a couple minutes. And as we get started here, I will try to share my screen briefly with the agenda so folks can see the agenda. Sally, give me a thumbs up if you can see the agenda. Okay, so let's have a chance to see the agenda before we get started. I'll pull it down in a second. Sally, do you know if we have Jim McHugh?
I
Have you seen
am
him?
looking through right now. I'm not seeing his name yet. I'm not.
Okay.
And we have
I'm
several. Oh, okay. Thank you.
I'm under Sideburn Run.
Okay, welcome, Jim. And I saw Peter
Mhm.
Sheehan, so I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is the 2021 Braddock District Community Pools Leadership Meeting. And first, I just want to thank all of you for the work you do as board members. I think we have some presidents and board members of our neighborhood and HOA pools. You know, what you do is so important and providing opportunities for our neighborhoods to come together and get to know each other and participate in group activities. And I know it has been an incredibly difficult 16 to 18 months for you. And the purpose of this meeting is twofold. One, as we did last year, to go through the COVID restrictions and protocols for this pool season, but also have a chance for a roundtable dialogue amongst yourselves to talk about best practices and share ideas, things that have worked well for you and things that haven't. Two things to keep in mind. Later on in the meeting, I am going to ask you for a little bit of help because as we're emerging from the pandemic and getting to a point where I hope soon we'll be able to go back to having in-person community meetings, perhaps like this. I'm starting to think about and wrestle with to what extent do we continue doing some things virtually because I have found that for some of our meetings, we maybe are getting more virtual participation than we would in person. It's maybe easier for folks to participate in a meeting from their kitchen or dining room or bedroom or basement than it would be if you had to drive to Braddock Hall. But I also recognize there's a human element that's lost when we're virtual rather than in person. So for this meeting specifically, think about your preference for next year and subsequent years, and we're going to have a poll that we'll put up on the screen a little bit later in the meeting, so you can share your perspective. That will help inform our decision making process for next year. The second piece that I just wanted to start before we get into the agenda is last year, Fairfax County created a Fairfax Rise grant program to support small businesses and nonprofits throughout the county. And I was very adamant throughout the process that we make sure that our community pools and other nonprofits, youth sports leagues, et cetera, would have the ability to apply for those grants. A couple of pools in the Braddock District were able to do that and were able to receive grant funding from Fairfax County last year. Unfortunately, the technicality of the application process made a number of our pools ineligible last year. I have been working very hard to make sure that doesn't happen again. I think my colleagues on the board of supervisors are tired of listening to me talk about how we need to support our community pools that have been really struggling during COVID. And I have learned that as we're putting together our grant program of COVID relief funding for this year, there will be increased eligibility for community pools. So the technicality that made a number of your pools ineligible last year because perhaps you don't directly employ people will no longer exclude you from being able to apply. So we will be sharing more information on that, the application process, et cetera, when we have it through our newsletters, the Braddock Beacon and Walkinshaw Advisory newsletter. So if you're not on that list, if you don't get those emails from us, send us an email, braddock@fairfaxcounty.gov, to sign up, and we'll share the eligibility. And Sally will also send it out to this list of folks when we have it. So I think that's good news, but we don't have all the details yet. So with that, I want to jump right into our agenda, and we're very fortunate. He did a wonderful job last year helping us work through the COVID-related challenges for your pools. We have Peter Sheehan from the Health Department. I think Peter has a presentation, and then we'll go into Q&A for Peter. So we'll do his presentation, we'll do COVID-related Q&A, and then we'll go into a broader roundtable discussion for you all to share your thoughts and insights with each other. So Peter, if you're there, you should be able to share your screen for your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Supervisor Walkinshaw. Let me check to make sure we are. I want to go here, I think. There we go. And there we are. Can we see it?
Yes, we got it.
Okay, so I'll quickly run through this. The 2021 COVID-19 guidelines, as you know, we are beginning to see a relaxation of the COVID restrictions, and this year that will be affecting our swimming pools. Indoor and outdoor public swimming pools must either implement the mandatory requirements of the latest forward Virginia guidelines or remain closed, just as last year. These guidelines are basically 3 documents: the guidelines for all business sectors, mandatory requirements for swimming pools, and mandatory requirements for recreational sports. We have those links on our website, or I can forward them to you if you need them. The guidelines for all business sectors. Physical distancing is the best practice. It's important that all businesses establish some kind of policy and procedures for maintaining the distance between all patrons, provide clear communications and signage at entrances and seating areas, and occupancy and ensuring that the occupancy doesn't get too large is a key component to the physical distancing piece. Disinfection and cleaning of routine areas within all business sectors is obvious, using cleaning frequently touched areas, including all seating. This is to include lifeguard stations, and then highly promote frequently hand washing in employees and patrons. The bathrooms must be open and soap and warm water must be provided. Workplace safety practices. It's important to ask your employees if they, before they start their work shift, if they're feeling sick, and if they are, they should stay home. Employees must wear masks over their nose and mouth, and designated staff people are to be responsible for all the COVID-19 concerns. There should be someone who knows a lot about this issue on staff. The requirements specific to swimming pools have not really changed. Post signage at the entrance that states no one with fever or symptoms of COVID-19 in the past 10 days or known exposure in the prior 14 days must be put up. That sign can be found on our website if needed. Post it, and then the post signage throughout the facility to provide the public friendly reminders about what social distancing is and how it should be followed. Facilities that operate water slides must ensure that physical distancing is maintained of 10 feet between patrons who are not members of the same family while they're waiting in line. The occupancy is limited to the entire facility, no more than 75% of the lowest occupancy load on the certificate of occupancy. And then all swimmers must maintain at least 10 feet from each other while swimming. When they're not family members, free swimming is allowed. With this, I will state that there's obviously going to be times in which people get very close to each other as they move across swimming lanes, and that is not what we're speaking of here. What we're talking about is, that you maintain the 10 feet as a practice. Swimming pool instruction and water exercise classes must be limited to allow all participants who are in the class, including the people who are teaching it, to maintain 10 feet from each other. Parents and guardians may support a participant during class, and instructors may have contact with swimmers when necessary. This hasn't changed from last year. Seating may be provided on the pool decks with at least 6 feet spacing between all persons who are not family members. Employees working in customer-facing areas are required to wear masks covering their nose and mouth. Lifeguards responding to distressed swimmers are exempt from this requirement, obviously. Prior to admission into any facility that has a swimming pool, the patrons must be screened for 1, COVID-19 symptoms, 2, a positive diagnostic test for the virus in the prior 10 days, or 3, known exposure in the last 14 days. Anyone experiencing symptoms should not be permitted in a pool facility. Swimming pool facilities that host swim meets and practices must follow all the mandatory requirements for recreational sports, in addition to the requirements of swimming pools and the guidelines for all business sectors. So I'll repeat that one more time. Swimming pool facilities that host swimming meets and practices must follow the swimming pool requirements, the guidelines for all business sectors, and then the mandatory requirements for recreational sports. So what are the mandatory requirements for recreational sports? For meets and practices held indoor, The total number of spectators cannot exceed the lesser of 30% of the occupancy load on the certificate of occupancy, or spectators must be limited to 100. I need to preface this with saying that on, let me look at the date. Please forget the date here, what date we're in here. One more, I think it's Saturday, but let me make sure. Saturday, on the 15th of May, the 30% is going to go up to 50%. So Saturday, it'll be 50%. For meets and practices held outdoors, the total number of spectators cannot exceed less than 30% and the occupancy load, et cetera, and the spectators must be limited to 1,000. For recreational sports, can again conduct daily screenings of coaches, officials, staff, and swimmers for the COVID symptoms, a positive diagnostic test for viruses within the prior 10 days, and known exposure to COVID-19 within the past 14 days. And again, as always, anyone experiencing symptoms should not be permitted into the pool facility. Spectators must wear masks over their nose and mouth at all times, and 6 feet distance must be maintained between spectators who are not family members. And that is the sum of it. Is there? Hope I didn't breathe through that.
No, I think that's good, Peter. If you can unshare your screen.
Okay.
And so we'll open it up to questions for Peter about that presentation. And the best way is to raise your hand. I can do questions that come in through the chat also, but it's much easier if folks raise their hand and you can ask your question verbally. And you raise your hand by, how do you raise your hand? Reactions. At the bottom of your screen, you can click reactions and then raise hand. And we have a couple hands going up. Before we get to the hands, there were a couple of questions that came in advance. So Peter, I'll pose a couple of questions to you that came in advance in writing, and then we'll go to the hands. And it actually looks like maybe one that's COVID related, and you probably answered this in the presentation. What COVID-19 related signs are recommended? An answer to this could help save communities some time in determining which signs are appropriate. So you had some language in the presentation there that should be used for signs. Maybe a question, Peter, would it be possible if you can send us your presentation and Sally can email it out to this entire list so they'll have that language themselves, or is there somewhere else folks can find the specific language to post on their signs?
Yeah, I will definitely send the PowerPoint out, and then the sign, I'll also include a link to the website, the health department's website, on where the signs are that you can download.
Got it. Okay. So we'll send Peter's presentation around, as well as the link. And for anyone who has not been getting email, if you heard about this meeting from a friend or someone else, rather than directly getting an email from Sally in my office, that means you're not on our email list for pool leadership. And if that's the case, you can email us, braddock@fairfaxcounty.gov, to be added to our pool leadership distribution list. So we'll make sure that you get that shortly. So let me go to the first hand that I think I saw raised. I see Ann Heischman. Ann, you can unmute and ask your question.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for hosting this. Question for Peter. When patrons are on the pool deck, do they have to wear masks?
Yes, they do.
They do. Okay.
Unless, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's some exemption for people who are in the same family. Yes, masks should be worn as a general practice.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
course.
Okay, thank you, Ann. Brittany Crawley.
Okay, so when it comes to swim team practices, our swim team practices during our pool operating hours. So does that mean that during their practice time, we would have to reduce our capacity from 75% to 50% because practices have to be 50%?
One more time.
So during operating hours, our capacity load could be at 75%, correct?
Yes.
Our swim team practices during our operating hours, Does that-
75% occupancy load, correct.
okay, but for swim team practices, it said 50%.
Right, but I preface that to say that on Saturday it moves up to 75%. So I gave you the presentation is the current number, and then we know that the governor's executive order is going to change on Saturday, and we've been given some of the changes that we know. So what was 50 is going to be.
I thought it was 30% to 50%.
That's for the 50% is the swimming pool piece. So the exercise class of any sort is 75% of the minimum occupancy load or 100 persons, and for group exercise fitness classes held outdoors, the total number can't exceed 250. Sorry if I was
Okay.
kind of.
Did that answer your question, Brittany?
I don't think so, but
I think it's
I'm-
50% only for spectators, Brittany, not for people practicing. It's for the spectators.
okay, so it's a spectator number, not participants in the pool.
Correct.
Is that right, Peter?
Right. So for sports played indoors, is this an indoor or an outdoor pool? You know, we'd have. But for
It's
sports,
outdoor.
so indoors, let's go run with indoors first. The total number of spectators cannot exceed lesser than 50%. That's the new number of the occupancy load, or 250 people. And then the folks that are taking part in the sport is at the 75%.
Okay.
Okay, so I think what she's saying is if they have a swim practice or swim meet during an open swim time, which limit applies? Presumably it's the lower limit, is that right? If multiple activities are going on, what's the overall occupancy limit?
Oh, I see. Yeah, so you're going to go with the lowest.
Okay.
Absolutely. Correct.
Got it. So if you have a swim meet or swim practice happening at the same time as your open swim time, your overall occupancy for that window of time is the lower of the two limits.
So
Okay.
can I just reiterate, just so that I'm because now I'm here and now I'm confused. I shouldn't be the one confused now. I'm joking. So just really quick again, the total number of attendees, this includes both participants and instructors, and an indoor group exercise or fitness class cannot exceed the lesser of 75% of the minimum occupancy load on the certificate, or 100 persons. This is the number that's changing on Saturday. It was 50, now it's 75. For group exercise and fitness classes held outdoors, the number is 250, cannot exceed 250. And then again, outdoor and indoor swimming pools may be open, provided occupancy is limited to no more than 75% of the lowest occupancy load on the certificate of occupancy. And all swimmers must maintain 10 feet physical distance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brittany. I see Amy with a hand up. Amy? We aren't, your screen, Amy, says connecting to audio, but we can't hear you. Are you there, Amy? Okay, Amy, your audio is still connecting, so we'll come back to you. Corey Lloyd.
I'm calling to follow up on a clarification about the mask mandate. So specifically as it pertains to outdoor pools, my understanding both from the governor and from the CDC is that when outdoors and able to follow social distancing, masks are not required. Can you clarify the mask expectations for outdoor pools, please?
Right. So I think that we went over the mask requirements. Masks are required. And that's I'm reading the governor's executive order, and that's what we're going with. There is some confusion on the two different numbers. We may see a change in this in June, but as of May 15th, it's what I spoke of in the presentation, that masks are required.
And that's I think the question was maybe getting at the changing in CDC guidance in terms of general outdoor activities for vaccinated people. And I think the key thing here, Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a separate set of guidance and category for pools, even though they're outdoors.
Correct, right, and the tricky part is how are we going to, or what is going to be our role in that piece about vaccination? But pools are its own piece, I guess. You're correct.
Okay. So
Matthew,
just to clarify one last time, the governor has never mandated the wearing of masks outdoors. So why is it that outdoor pools are held to a different standard than the rest of outdoor public spaces in Virginia?
Because pools, as I stated earlier, are being looked at under three different mechanisms: recreational sports, swimming pools, and then businesses, general businesses at large.
okay, thank you, Corey. We have Matthew Parks. Matthew?
Hi there. Hey, I'm here. Peter, thank you for taking time out of your day. You're probably supposed to be off about this time, so thanks. I noticed you didn't mention anything about reservation systems. That's pretty good news, I think. And I know your state and all the requirements that are in place right now, and it sounds like it's likely going to change on June 15th, so that's probably pretty good news. So it sounds like opening day for all of us. We probably just say the pool's open, 75% capacity, 6-foot distancing on the deck, 10-foot distance in the pool, wear your mask while you're on the deck. That's about the short of it, right, Peter? Not getting into the weeds on it, but that sound about right. A lot of signage up and wash your hands.
Signage and then social distancing, make sure that social distancing is at the proper distance. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. That sounds pretty good. Swim team, I think NBSL's handling some of that. They're probably putting guidance out for most of us. So, and again, thanks, Peter. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Wait.
Jessica,
I think one more second. I think someone else had a comment in the chat here, Jim Homan, who I work with. Can we offer vaccinated persons only swim period of 2 to 3 hours per day where we can disregard the 6 to 10-foot separation and mask requirement and disregard capacity limits?
No, I think I went over the what's going to be required as of today up to the 15th of May, and then we'll know more in June. But no, up to this point, vaccination is not going to be part of the equation.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
okay, Jessica Albers. Jessica.
Hi, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. My question is regarding applying what we do for water slides. So they talk about 10-foot requirement in the line for water slides. And I've been applying that as it pertains to our diving well, right? So people are standing in line unmasked because they've just come out of the pool. Would it be safe to say that it would be appropriate to apply that 10-foot distance requirement while individuals are waiting in line? You think about like dive team, for example. Does that make sense, Peter?
Yes, and it does. And I would do the more conservative approach to that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Mark. I don't have a last name. It says Mark.
Hi, I'm with Ilda Pool, and we have a daycare or a childcare provider that runs a summer camp, and one of his activities is coming to the pool. We are curious best way to handle it, as far as, do we need to force them to maintain the social distancing, or do they come as their own cohort because they're part of a daycare group?
I'm a little confused on the question. One more time, I'm sorry.
A summer camp uses our pool, and they come with a group of 30 people. Are we required to force them to separate 6 feet, or do they show up as their own cohort and as a family unit?
No, so I'm making the assumption that it's your pool, you're in charge of the pool, then it becomes an expectation that you're managing the pool appropriately to the executive order. So it would be come upon you to ensure that this summer camp is following the rules. If I understand the question.
So yeah, I mean, this is Amy. I'm sorry, I couldn't access my audio. Mark's my husband. It's a martial arts camp. He is the owner is a member of the pool, and so essentially we have worked out an arrangement for many years where they come to the pool, and I basically, I guess, pay for guest passes to come twice a week, and so they're together in a facility that's indoors together, and I don't know what their requirements are in terms of distance within that facility. But I'm wondering if there are different rules that apply to daycare versus recreational. And if that would be different when they're at the pool, if they will have to maintain, is it 6 or 10 feet of social distancing when they're in the water and then out of the water?
So yeah, no, there's there may be differences between daycare and pools, but in the case of what we're discussing here, the swimming pool rules are going to take precedence over everything. So the 3 different issues of general business, recreational sports, and swimming pools all take precedence over all of the other issues. So the daycare has to behave appropriately to the environment that they're in, which in this case.
Okay. Two more really quick questions. One is, you mentioned capacity rules changing May 15th. Are any other social distancing or anything else changing that's applicable to pools?
No, I'm sorry. Just the numbers that I discussed,
Okay.
and then there's some changes that don't have to do with pools in general, but that doesn't have to do with pools.
And then the other question is, do you anticipate that, assuming in June 15th, that we are maintaining an appropriate progress in terms of COVID? The governor has announced that social distancing rules will not apply. Is that still your?
Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't know the answer to that question. So I wouldn't even be able to comment on that. I apologize.
No problem.
Okay. Next question, Kelly DeBridney. Kelly DeBridney, I apologize if I got your last name wrong there. Kelly?
No problem. Thank you. Thanks again for hosting. Another thank you. 2 quick questions. Any requirement this summer to maintain, visitor or patron records for contact tracing purposes? It sounds like a lot of pools may be doing away with the reservation aspect. Will we have any contact tracing requirements, more in line with the business standards?
No more than, what's been required even before COVID. And I think the reservation piece was added on just due to the nature of swimming pools. But so no, there is no requirement on that. Contract tracing will always occur whether there's records or not. So
Okay, so no requirement to keep records. Thank you so much. And my other question, in the event the pool itself of our grounds, the pool is closed, but we're using the grounds or facility for other purposes, is the 10-foot social distancing still required if it's closed?
Absolutely, and so is the occupancy limits to the grounds and facility itself. Remember, this is not just the swimming pool, but the facility itself. So the occupancy.
Yep. Some people interpret 6 feet when you're out of the water and 10 feet is only related to swimming. I have always understood it as 10 feet every time you're an inch inside the facility and the grounds. So you're concurring with that, Peter? It is always 10 feet, other than chairs that may be spaced 6 feet apart.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. The 6 feet part is only the chair piece.
Okay, very clear. Thank you.
Okay, we have a couple of hands that are still up, but I think they already asked questions, Mark and Corey Lloyd. Okay, so folks can still raise your hand to ask a question, but I'm going to go into the chat and I'll pose to Peter some of the questions that are in the chat that haven't
Supervisor
been
Walkinshaw.
answered.
This is Corey Lloyd. My hand was down and then came back up again because I did have a second question.
Okay, go ahead, Corey.
So I'm directly reading the Fairfax County Department of Health website for the pools as we were referenced. And the only reference I can see to face mask requirements for outdoor pools is under the best practice areas, where it specifically says to encourage patrons to wear face coverings, but there is no mention to require it while walking on the deck by patrons on an outdoor open air pool. And there was no requirement last year, so this is counter to and more severe than last year. And lastly, the CDC has specifically said that wet face masks are unsafe to wear. So anybody wearing a face mask between swim sessions would inherently be wearing an unsafe mask. So I again ask for some clarification on why we're now tamping down and being more severe, and where that reference is that states that all patrons within the deck pool area of an outdoor pool are required to wear a face mask.
As I stated earlier, the pools are being looked at under 3 different mechanisms: general businesses at large, fitness centers, and then swimming pools in general. It is in the best public health interest that all individuals wear masks until we get a better control of the pandemic. And that is the recommendation of the health department and is what the executive order states.
Okay. So if the executive order states that, and that was not enforced last year, either the health department was in violation when it directed everyone that face masks were not required then, and now that they're illegal by law, or we're getting confused here. But I again am asking for the specific reference, not just saying that we're covered by these 3 different things. Where is the specific reference that calls out the requirement to wear masks on an open air pool deck when social distancing is possible?
Okay, I think It sounds like the specific reference is in the executive order, and
It is not.
we
So I
will-
ask again from the health department executive that's here representing
So, Mr.
to
Lloyd,
cite
please,
what he's referring to.
Mr. Lloyd, I'll be more than happy to. I may be, you know, off on this. I doubt I am, but you feel free to email me or call me directly at my office. I can give you my number. It's 703-246-8470. That's a direct line to me. We can talk tomorrow, and I'll give you the reference or find out what's going on the bottom of this. But let's look at this in the bigger picture scheme. Wearing a mask when you're out and about around people is at this point smart public health, and it's not a matter of it being of breaking a law, breaking a rule. It's where we're at and where we're trying to get to. So I will try to find that exact place where it exists and then get that to you tomorrow if you'd like to give me a call.
And we'll also distribute that information when we send the presentation around, so we make sure everyone's on the same page. Let me go into the chat. And we have one question: no reservation system required. I think we've answered that. Not a requirement, although you do have to observe the capacity limits. Charlotte asks, excuse me, what are the guidelines if we find out a patron/employee had COVID while at the facility? So if a pool learns that someone has visited their pool, subsequently tests positive for COVID, Peter, what should they do?
Well, I would, I would, the positive COVID tests, when they come back positive, there's a humongous infrastructure that's in place with the health department that is doing contact tracing and checking with folks who become positive for COVID. And so, I would just simply ask the individual, have they been contacted by the health department? And I'm assuming this person has returned after they've have passed the date of getting better, or you hear about them being at the house or something to that effect. Don't panic, and if they have a positive COVID test, they are being checked by the health department.
So the health department will conduct the contact tracing, and the pool doesn't need to take any action unless they're instructed to do so.
Correct.
Okay. I suspect if you face a specific situation like that and you've heard something, you can always reach out to the health department to get any guidance or advice that's specific and unique to that situation.
And give me a call also if you just want to touch base with me, and I can run it through the channels to find out what's going on.
Right. Okay, we've got a number of questions about masks while on the deck, and we'll distribute that information as a follow-up along with the presentation. Prediction. The question was asked. Okay, here we go. Here's a question. Can interactive fountains and splash pads open this year on time?
Yes. Interactive fountains can open and run as they do.
Gotcha. Okay. Yep, I see. Carol, I know you have your hand up. Once I get through the chat questions, I'll get to you. Here's a a question. I think this was answered. Please clarify once again the distancing requirement. The governor's executive order says all swimmers maintain at least 10 feet of distance. Seating areas are 6 feet. So I think we covered that. The chairs are 6 feet apart, other than family members together, but the 10-foot distance maintenance is both in the pool and out of the pool.
Yeah, my question there is, I don't understand I'm not understanding the 10 feet out of the pool, because the executive order mentions specifically swimmers, which if you're a swimmer, you're in the water. And then I thought it specifically said 6 feet. I know it said between seating areas. So I'm not sure we're getting the 10 feet out of the water, how that's coming into play there.
Well, again, what's getting confusing for everyone, I think, is that we're literally at the cusp of changing from one direction to another direction, and then literally in a month going to change into another direction. We have CDC guidelines that are recommending one avenue, and we're still in another. So what I try to tell everyone is to practice the more safer route that you think it is. The distancing is 6 feet between seats that are placed on the pool deck. But then you're going to have clusters of people together that aren't going to be 10 feet apart. They're family members or something to that effect. So again, what's important here is to use a consistency with each of your facilities, so that that consistency can be demonstrated through practice. And so the mask wearing, back to the original question about mask wearing and or distancing on a deck, those numbers are going to rapidly start changing as we get closer to June. So where we are at is in a place of that transition. So I apologize for all the confusion on all this, but again, it's better to be safe than sorry at this point.
I guess, Peter, what people need to know now is when they're opening Memorial Day weekend, does their signage and their advice to people need to say that you should maintain 10 feet of distance at all times, even when you're on the deck, or 6 feet of distance?
There it is. So it's a 6 feet space between seats, and so there's an expectation that the 6 feet is the distance. The 10 feet is in relative to the swimmers coming out of the swimming pool onto the deck, and that's where the confusion comes in a lot. Is the swimmers are 10 feet apart, but when I get on the deck, I can get back closer. What we're talking about is in general, the general approach to how we approach social distancing, and it is a 6 feet distance between chairs on the deck and 10 feet within the water. But then again, when people are swimming lanes, there's going to be times when they're much closer than 10 feet. So how do you work that? Well, there's an expectation that they will get very close to each other and then very rapidly swim apart.
Okay, we have a question about water fountains and drinking water. Can the water fountains be turned on? I think the answer is yes, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, here's a question. If the governor issues new regulations to ease restrictions on June 15th, as expected, how quickly can we expect the county health department to issue new guidance? Will we need to wait for the health department to issue updated guidance, or can we make changes based upon the governor's changes?
Yeah, the governor these rules are not part of our government's infrastructure, meaning that it's larger. So yeah, the minute the governor changes the rules, that's why we emphasize that you keep an eye on these executive orders. you can immediately change your behavior in your facilities.
Gotcha. So you do not have to wait. The governor's order is the law of the land. You don't have to wait for Fairfax County Health Department to blast it out or to update it or to share it. Of course, we will do that, but you don't have to wait. Okay, I think those are all the questions I see in the chat. And Carol Marty, Carol, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to step backwards a little bit, but we were going to advise our homeowners that they could not use the water fountain. You clarified that the water fountain can be used. So the next question is, can you bring snacks to the pool? Because a lot of people with their children give food to the pool. Can they bring food in the pool area?
Yeah, I don't know of any prohibition on food. I'll have to check with that. I don't believe there is anything related to food in the pool, other than what the pool code states, and that was pre-COVID. You know, obviously you couldn't bring certain things around the pool.
Yeah. Okay, that we would need to know that, because we're sending out our applications. We have 500 homes in our community that share our pool. So we would like to know that before we tell them that. The other thing is the screening at the entrance to the pool, that we were going to implement just a thermometer, or the taking your temperature. What else do we have to do other than that to take the temperature of the person when they come into the pool? Do we need to have a signage for them to answer yes or no? Do they have any symptoms of COVID?
Correct. I mentioned the 3 or 4 things that you have to do in the presentation, and I'll have that sent out.
Okay.
You know,
So we would have to take their temperature as they before they enter the pool.
I don't believe taking the temperature is a requirement. I think it is asking them,
Oh,
have they
okay.
had symptoms, been in contact with anyone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, it's not a requirement. Okay. The other thing is cleaning. We were adjusting our hours to the pool to indicate we would be open from 12 to 2, and then we would close from 2 to 2:30 to clean the surfaces of the pool. And we were not going to allow people to bring, we were not going to put out our pool furniture also. So should we be following that directive, not putting out our pool furniture? Should we be cleaning every 2 hours the surface areas in the pool?
Yes, I mean, the furniture can be put out, as I stated earlier. It has to be 6 feet apart from each other, and then the cleaning disinfection has to happen between each use. That includes the lifeguard stand also.
So if we don't put the furniture out, we do not have to clean it, of course. And that was our perspective, to advise our people that they need to bring their own furniture, because it would be a laborious task to clean all the furniture on the pool deck. Comments?
And yeah, again, the health department would have no comment on that, because that would be up to you on putting in a higher standard than what's required. But you are correct in your assessment of what you said.
Okay. So the water fountain can be turned on, and people can bring food to the pool.
Again, I do not know about the food situation. The food, sounds to me as an issue of the pool code in and of itself. And I feel uncomfortable about answering that question without knowing more about what food you're bringing. So I would ask you to give me a call in the morning, so I can make sure I'm clear on that, exactly what's asking.
Okay, because people order pizza at the pool and they bring pizza in, and I know they have pizza deliveries. So if you could give me your number, I would appreciate it.
Again, sure. My number's direct line is 703-246-8470. And you can call that number at any time and get hold of me. I'm always
okay. So I probably have more questions for you, but they're my major questions, because I'm glad it was brought up that we can use the water fountain. because we thought we need to turn on the water fountain, turn off the water fountain. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Carol.
Thank-
Thanks,
thank-
Carol. Salim Sawaya. Salim?
Thank you. Prior to COVID, we required patrons to enter through the bathrooms, I believe, per county health guidelines or requirements. Last year, I think we were given a, exception to not require that, so patrons could just walk through the gate. Is that okay again this year, or do we need to go back to requiring patrons to enter through the bathrooms?
Again, the requirement of making sure that all patrons are asked the COVID questions is still a requirement. So I believe the reason why you did, or the facilities did what they did, was to facilitate that to occur in an easier
Exactly.
fashion. I would imagine you would keep it the same.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see Somerset Old Creek has their hand up.
Yeah,
Not sure who
my name is Kirsten Reddish. I just wanted to share with Carol and maybe with other pools that had the same concern about sanitizing the furniture. The solution that we used last year, which worked really, really well. We got a pump sprayer. You can buy them for like $15. And we filled it with sanitizing solution. It's just a third a cup bleach to 3/4 gallon water. And the lifeguards would just soak the furniture, and they'd soak everything in the bathrooms, and it takes 2 seconds to sanitize that way. So the lifeguards actually really enjoyed using the pump sprayer, and it's really quick. So if you're concerned about the furniture, that would be my suggestion.
Can you please
Great.
send us information on that? That would be great.
Sure, yeah, I'll type it in the chat and I'll send a link to the one we used.
Okay, great, because we could put our pool furniture out if we had that option.
Yeah.
Okay,
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of more questions for Peter in the chat before we move on in our agenda. One question, what will the health department look for when doing inspections? Peter, I suspect the answer is all of the above, but anything you want to share in terms of the inspection process?
It'll be the same process that we always do, with the addition of ensuring signage and social distancing is being practiced. Again, again, in terms of enforcement, this is a gray area. What our attempt here is not to shut down swimming pools, but really to help the community at large to do the practices that would lead the most safety of their patrons. So it'd be the normal everyday pool inspection with additional education on the COVID pieces.
Okay, Joan asks, what about concessions? Any restrictions on the sale of concessions at the pool?
No, the COVID and as I said with the other food question, COVID and food are not really related. It's not really a COVID question. With that said, I would prefer those to be couched within the pool code and the food code, which are two different ordinances that govern this activity, but they're not related to COVID. So they're they're different.
Okay. If there aren't any other COVID or health department related questions, I don't see any other hands up. We will wrap up this portion of the agenda. And Peter, thank you again for joining us. And again, we will send around the presentation and the information related to masks to the whole group tomorrow. But Peter, thank you. You're welcome to stay, of course, but you don't need to. And I think this will probably be a good point before we lose folks, Sally, to go ahead and do the poll. If we can post the poll, and again, I'm looking to get your feedback when we do this meeting next year. If we were to do it in person, it would probably be at Braddock Hall outside of my office at the Kings Park Library. Would you prefer to come there and see everyone in person, or is it much more convenient and easier to do it virtually? So everyone can please click your response to that, and it'll help us plan for next year. And Sally, just give me the thumbs up. Do we know?
We have
I guess
50 of 65 people that have responded already.
Okay, all right.
40
People
seconds.
are doing
So
it.
yes, people are
Okay.
doing it. And it
Okay.
looks like virtual meetings are taking the lead pretty significantly.
All right. Okay. So let's move on to our best practices and helpful tips section. And we do want to open it up and have a bit of a roundtable discussion for you all to share your perspective and lessons learned and challenges and best practices. But before we do that, I invited Jim McHugh, the president of the Sideburn Run Pool, to share a few things that they've been doing successfully. Jim?
Thank you, Supervisor Walkinshaw. I appreciate your hosting this event again this year. I think it's important for pools to have this information sharing so that we can, follow guidelines and keep everybody healthy and safe. With that said, last year, what we did at Sideburn Run, and I've seen other community pools near us do it. We reached out to the other community pools to see what they were doing and kind of worked in tandem when we could. It was really communication is what it comes down to, right? Be in constant contact with your membership. We were having every other week emails with our membership, letting them know what we were doing, how we were following the guidance, if we would open, when we would open, scenario planning with them, letting them know, well, we may not open. If we don't open, here's what would happen. And then once the pool opened, we just had a once a week communication, just real constant communication with them. The other thing that was really important was we got our membership involved, right? So we set up a committee to review the rules that were coming from the CDC, the government, the state and local governments to, kind of get everybody involved. We had our swim coach, our dive coach. We had some influential older members, some new members, so that way everybody felt like they were a part of it and they were heard on what we could do. And again, that information just kept flowing out to our membership, which is really important. So at the end of the day, it was really communication, and our members said that they had a really good experience last year, and I hope all of your pools were able to open and had a great season. Again, this year we're just following the same thing that we did last year. Communication with our members, letting them know we'll open, posting stuff on our website so that they can read it, they can see it. The new and potential members, there's been a lot of movement around the area since COVID started. We have a lot of new younger members already just this year, so it's really exciting. But now we have to educate them on these rules that we put in last year. We're essentially finishing off, or we're starting this year how we finished off last year. Essentially, there's not a whole lot of changes that I saw. So, I hope everybody has a great season. But just keep your membership, involved and really communicate. Because if you think you're communicating too much, you're probably not. So just kind of keep hitting them over and over again. That's really the best recommendation I can give. Supervisor.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Jim. Really appreciate that and appreciate you kicking us off. So at this point, we will open it up and it's an opportunity. If you've done something that has worked really well that you want to share with others, or something that you're struggling with and trying to figure out that maybe someone else has figured out an answer to, this is an opportunity to share that. So again, raise your hand is the best. I'll try to monitor the chat also. Who wants to kick us off? We have a question in the chat. What is everyone doing related to kids' fun areas, basketball, foosball, cornhole? We're reopening our playground and we'll sanitize with the pump sprayer. I think we had the link for the pump sprayer there. Anyone want to kick us off here by raising their hand? If not, I'll just assume everyone has everything figured out and you've all mastered pool leadership. Okay, Kelly has her hand up. Go ahead, Kelly.
All right, remembering how to unmute first. So we are going to try, for the kids to make their pool experience feel as, normal as they remember it pre-COVID. So we are opening back up our slide. Of course, diving board was open. We are adding that very risky water basketball net, but are really excited about it. We're bringing back our ping pong table. So we're basically doing bring your own gear, which they've come, kind of normalized to at their basketball practices and the like. So we're hoping they bring their own water basketball / water volleyball. We're going to sell paddles and balls for our ping pong table out of our little snack shack. So maybe you get your own, you put your name on it throughout the summer, but we're going to give it a gamble. I think these kids are very respectful in the locations I see them. I think they get it. So we're going to give our kids a chance to play their water basketball, stay distanced, line up distance for the slide, have fun at ping pong. We have a sand volleyball pit as well. So we're going for it with bring your own gear. That takes out the need to clean, is our current thinking.
Great, wonderful idea. Thank you, Kelly. I see Somerset, Old Creek with the hand up again.
Yeah, I'm wondering what pools are thinking about social events. In normal years, we have like wine and cheese, other kinds of things like that. I guess legally we're allowed to have them up to 75% capacity, but what are pools really thinking is an appropriate limit to the number of people at social events, or are you guys even having social events this summer?
Great question. Yeah. So anyone want to weigh in terms of their thoughts or planning for social events? I'm looking in the chat to see if anyone, food trucks. Yeah. So Mark responded with food trucks. I know a lot of neighborhoods and pools have been having food truck nights. Yep, a couple folks with the food truck. So that's a great idea for a social event. Kelly says Friday night DJ. So it sounds like folks are planning to move forward with various social events. Dan says, okay, so here's a good tactical piece of advice here. They're going to do reservations for some social events like a live band, wine tasting, etc., with reserved table spaces. So maximize their space. Sally from my office says, has anyone thought about doing a movie night? Mantua has bands. We're working on figuring that out. Thank you, Dan, for the reservation idea. Okay, we got some movie night enthusiasts here. So we got a lot of good social ideas. I think the reservation idea is a great one, depending on your space. But food trucks obviously don't need a reservation for that. Yep, movie nights. Okay, anyone else want to ask a question or throw out any other ideas or thoughts? This is probably, maybe we should have done the poll after this, because this is the kind of dialogue that's much easier to have in person than virtually, probably.
We could try relaunching the poll if you want to.
Well, a couple folks I did see asked, whether a hybrid option would be possible with some folks in person and then streaming it live, which is an option. It's a bit, having participated in a number of meetings like that, it's challenging technologically to pull off in a way that everyone feels fully engaged, and making sure that you're engaging the folks who are virtual also. But that is certainly an option that we'll look at for this meeting in the future and other meetings. Okay, I'll give it one last go. If anyone wants to throw out any ideas or questions for your fellow pool board members and leaders, otherwise we'll wrap up a little bit early. Okay, Kelly asks in the chat, curious what pools are doing during afternoon swim practices. Are they staying open to members? So does anyone want to raise their hand or weigh in on how you're handling that swim practice? We did have the conversation about the capacity limits and following whatever happens to be the lowest capacity limit for the activity that's taking place. But if anyone wants to share thoughts on that.
This is Jessica Albers. I'm from North Springfield Swim Club. We actually thought long and hard about what we wanted to do. And so it's actually a hybrid right now. So when swim practices open up, we will be having afternoon practices for the first 2 weeks until school ends. When school actually does end, then we're going to be moving to morning practices before the pool opens. It was just because we didn't want to, we're going to be using a reservation system. We have it set up on the hour for 50 minutes, which then I know there were a couple people asking about cleaning. We clean between each set of patrons that come through. So with 50-minute segments, then we allow our staff to clean within that 10-minute period, as well as transition guests in and out. And we found that worked excellently last year, and we're going to continue that this year, at least as we open the pool. And I think that's worked out well for the long-term strategy for us.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Very helpful. Anyone else on that topic? We've got a lot of feedback in the chat on that I won't read through, but folks can read it. There's a question from Charlotte. When does the new round of Fairfax Rise grants open? And the answer is, I don't know. I hope soon, but we will share that information both through our broader Braddock Beacon newsletters, but also to this specific pool board list that Sally sends information to. Jen asks, okay, here's a good question for folks. Are you allowing guests? I assume Jen's just asking in general, are you allowing your members to bring guests? Sideburn says yes. I suspect the answer is yes. Yeah, it looks like the answer is yes from everyone. And as long as you're under the capacity limits, obviously guests are perfectly fine. Kelly says last year no guests, but this year yes. So guests seem to be a go from pretty much everyone.
Can I ask a question? Oh, sorry.
Please. Yes. I'm not sure who this is, but go ahead. Is it
sorry.
Jessica again?
Jessica
Oh, sure.
again. Sorry
Yeah.
about that. So for the guest question, we were using a pretty strict interpretation that guests are usually not part of family members or family units as they're defined in the guidelines. Are we saying that how are other clubs interpreting that policy? Are they just saying, look, if they come as a guest, we're not asking who they are and if they're related, and therefore we'll just turn a blind eye, and therefore we can assume that they can associate under stricter guidelines and not maintain that 6 foot or 10 foot distance? Because to me, I read it differently. So I want to better understand how other pools are interpreting that.
Yeah, well, Peter is not here anymore. I think Peter would probably say that a family unit is a family unit and a guest isn't part of a family unit. I'm sure that's probably the regulation. I would say I certainly would not expect a pool to be able to enforce that or start questioning people. And obviously the definition of a family is maybe more fluid than might seem sometimes. So, I think my advice would be if people show up together, make sure that they maintain distance from other groups, but be very difficult to start questioning each group and asking whether their guest is a family member, because you could have someone who's a guest and a family member. Maybe just isn't a member of the pool. But Jessica posed the question not to me, but to others. Anyone want to? Joan talks about the challenge in policing that. Matthew says we didn't allow guests last year, but are considering it this year. Yeah, I think Jessica, it seems like the consensus is most folks won't be trying to police the family versus guest issue. Susie does ask, how much should we be requiring our lifeguards to police social distancing? And again, Peter isn't here. I think he would say that is part of the guidance. So the health department's expectation is that, the pool will enforce it. So if, there are folks who are not part of a family unit who aren't social distancing on the deck, we would hope the pool, whether it's a lifeguard or someone else, would enforce it. Carol has her hand up, maybe in response to one of the conversations we've been having. So let me go to Carol.
Yes, I just wanted to say we are not allowing guests because of the capacity limits. So we want to make sure our residents have access to the pool before their guests have access to the pool. I guess that's what I want to point out.
Got it. Yeah, so that's a good thing for pools to think about. Can you accommodate all of your members under the capacity limits? And if you're concerned that you might not be able to accommodate all your members, maybe you don't want to allow guests, but some pools probably are confident that they can accommodate both members and guests under the capacity limits. Jeff and a couple folks talking about lifeguards have made a good point, probably one that I should have made, is that the lifeguards need to be focused on the swimmers, and someone else should focus on social distancing. So very good point and absolutely true. The lifeguards in the chair responsible for the swimmers should be focused on that, and someone else should be responsible for keeping an eye on social distancing. Mary from Mantua points out that she spent a lot of time and board members talking to their members about social distancing and the guidelines, and we'll do that again. Yep, Laura reiterates lifeguards should focus on the swimmers. A couple capacity comments. Okay, Carol, you still have your hand up. Did you have something else, or was that just
Yeah, I
left
just
up from before?
So are people opening their baby pools also? You know, we have a baby pool and we're thinking of closing the baby pool. So I guess there's a question because it's very limited capacity in the baby pools.
Good question. Okay, baby pool, relatively small area, I guess. We have a couple folks saying baby pool, yes, by reservation. Yes, limiting to 2 families. Yes, yes with reservation. Limited to 2 families. Yes, limited 3 to 4 families. This is a good idea from Mantua. Mantua, thank you for joining us from the Providence District. Mantua opened our wading pool last year in phase 3 to 3 or 4 families with a dry erase board sign up. So that's a good idea. You don't have to have a complicated system, just a dry erase board to create a waiting list. You know, if you can accommodate 2 or 3 or 4 families in the wading pool or baby pool, that could work, or maybe 1 family, depending on the size and how much you want to police it. So that's a good recommendation. Dry erase board sign up to open that baby pool, but limit the capacity. John Berlin, we have John Berlin from the Fairfax County Park Authority. John, you have your hand up. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, John Berlin, I work with the aquatics area as part of my work with the Park Authority as well. But I also have just recently been working with Neighborhood and Community Services and the Department of Economic Development Initiatives, who are looking at the next round of grants that Supervisor Walkinshaw mentioned. I just wanted to give a heads up to everybody that this is a very fast moving process that is really just beginning now. As a matter of fact, the guidelines by the Treasury Department were released at the same time that this meeting began tonight, slightly earlier this afternoon, perhaps. But you should expect that there will be some information coming out. We'll make sure that it's distributed through the supervisor's office as well as other locations. But you should not expect any of the grants money to be awarded to community pools and other organizations, most likely until probably September, when the process is worked through, the application process is developed. This is a part of the money that goes from the American Rescue Plan Act that then filters down to a wide variety of recreation sector businesses. And the county is working to identify probably 4 or 5 specific areas where we know that private organizations and nonprofits have been heavily impacted. And we're trying to come up with a fair and equitable way to set up an application process and that groups can be considered for that money. But it is coming our way. And so if you have questions, you can feel free to direct them to me. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts and ideas about that as we develop the criteria for who is most impacted and what would be most helpful for you.
John, put your email in the chat there and or any contact information that you want to share.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Carol, I see your hand. Do you have something else, no, Carol, or is your hand?
No, my hand should be down at this point. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
Sorry.
Okay, so that's all right. So we covered the baby pools. We got some good responses on that. Any other issues that anyone wants to raise? We have about 5 minutes left. Okay, going once, going twice. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us again. I think we covered a lot of ground, got some good some good information. And again, as a follow-up, we will share the presentation, the information from Peter. And if you have not been receiving emails from Sally Kitilov in my office, that means you're not on our pools list. So please email us, braddock@fairfaxcounty.gov, so you can subscribe to that and to our Braddock Beacon email, so you'll get the information that was shared tonight and the upcoming information that John outlined for us on the grant program. Sally, anything that I missed before we wrap up?
I don't think you missed anything. We'll send out the information when we have it from Peter tomorrow.
Okay, all right, great. Sally, thank you for organizing this. Thank you to Peter, John Berlin, and all of you for joining. And I wish you a wonderful and successful pool season. Have a great night.
Supervisor Walkinshaw, thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.